So it's been about a week since Blue Origin's NS-31 mission, that all-female flight to space that literally everybody has been talking about. And I was one of the hosts of Blue Origin's live launch webcast, and I promised that I'd make a video about this. But honestly, it's taken me about a week to fully process the mission and all of the aftermath, because I was, and I still am, really proud to have been a part of it. But I also hear the criticism. And so one of the things that I've been doing to process all this is talking with other women in the space industry, and especially other women in the space industry who were there. Many of them don't want to talk about this publicly because the backlash has been so fierce. But I just think that this is a really important moment, one that's really worthy of nuance and a really thoughtful discussion. And so that's what I'm really hoping that we can have here today, with two incredible women who were also there at the NS-31 launch. NASA astronaut Cady Coleman, who retired from NASA in 2016, and Rachel Lyons, who is the former executive director of Space for Humanity, the group that's responsible for partially sponsoring one of the NS-31 crew members' seats, Amanda Nguyen. So Cady, Rachel, thank you both so much.
Thank you so much, Kristin. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Absolutely. And it's nice just to be able to talk about the launch and other things in our careers. It's been great catching up.
It's been so good catching up. And we didn't get enough time to talk at the launch. So I'm really glad that we're able to do this here. And I think it would be helpful to start by kind of explaining our roles in this mission, what we were doing there, why it was so important for us to be there. And I'll start, full disclosure, I was paid by Blue Origin to host their live launch webcast. So I just want to be very transparent about that. And, my job was essentially the same job that I've always had, which was to sit at that desk and be a journalist, a space journalist. So I didn't say anything in that broadcast that I wouldn't have said in my role at CNN as a space contributor. But I just want to be really honest and disclose that before we really get into things. So that's why I was there. And while I was there, I ran into Rachel and Cady. And Cady, why don't you start? Why was it so important for you to be there? Because it's a trek to get out there from Massachusetts all the way to West Texas. You fly to El Paso, drive 2 hours, and then you got to get out to Blue Origin's facilities at Launch Site 1. So why'd you want to make the trek?
I've been waiting for this flight. I've actually been concerned that when I watch, launch after launch of these commercial launches, and I see so few women, and basically I have been in fear that women are missing this space race. It was really amazing to be there, knowing that the mission of this mission was to open everybody's eyes that, space belongs to all of us. We're all from one planet. And in my experience, having more and more people go to space, it makes a difference here on Earth and up in space.
Rachel, what was your role in this mission?
So I am the former executive director of Space for Humanity, and I now serve on the board of directors. And we were approached a while ago, while I was still the executive director, about a partial sponsorship for Amanda Nguyen's seat. And the mission of Space for Humanity, it's similar to what Cady is saying, is to sponsor as many people as possible to go to space, because when astronauts go to space and they look back at our floating, fragile, interconnected planet, it causes a cognitive shift. And our belief as an organization, as well as mine as an individual, is if we have enough people having this type of cognitive shift, then we can begin to reach a tipping point on Earth where more people are prioritizing humanity, more people are prioritizing the Earth. And so when Amanda approached us and we learned about this opportunity, given her commitment to supporting sexual assault survivors, what she's dedicated to for the past more than decade of her life, we knew that giving her as much of a platform as possible is our mission coming to fruition. And so for us, it was just a no-brainer. And we're really lucky to have sponsored. We've been involved with 6 or 7 people going to space now both on Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, and every single person has had this profound overview effect experience. And so this is real, and we all watched it happen at the launch.
I was watching with a bunch of the people that supported this mission, and there's something about launching. It's a visceral just feeling, knowing that everything has to go just right. It is still a really big deal to leave this planet, to launch into space on a rocket. And I think it takes courage. It takes trust in the team that puts that together. And watching the team and watching it was also people supporting each of these astronauts. I could see they were surprised how emotional they felt, because it's clear it's a really amazing, big deal, and you just want everything to go just right.
Rachel, how was the launch for you?
It was incredible. I mean, we're out there in the middle of the desert in West Texas. Like, there's nothing around for miles, and everyone coming together for this celebration.
You feel so much during launch. You feel the nerves, you feel the excitement, you feel the focus. And then after these women get back to Earth, those first little bits of criticism started to come in. And, I knew there was going to be criticism going into this. I covered Jeff Bezos's flight. I covered Richard Branson's flight. I remember the billionaire backlash back in, 2021. So I knew there was going to be criticism. I just didn't realize how much criticism. Rachel, were you prepared for that? Did you see that coming?
So yes and no. As you mentioned, there's been criticism the whole time. A lot of the same narratives of like, this is just the billionaires' boys club, or, why do we need to leave Earth to learn how to love it? And all of that is really understandable, and I understand. I was really surprised to see the volume, the magnitude of this went viral as something to hate. And that to me felt really shocking. When this is Blue Origin's, I think, 11th crewed flight. Mm-hmm. And so there's been 10 before this that never went viral, only a handful of people had something to say about it. And then this one that happened to be all women is the one that the whole world, not the whole world, but a lot of people are choosing to hate. So I think to me, there's a big, it's like a little bit of a wake up call around what's happening in the collective consciousness.
I was really disappointed because I'd been on the ground with Blue Origin for about, 5 days leading up to that mission. And the thing that I think got lost was the fact that this wasn't just about an all-female crew. Blue Origin really made a concerted effort to make this female forward, female focused. From a majority of the people in mission control were women. There was a female flight director. They had an all-female broadcast team. They really tried to make this a celebration of women. And I'm not somebody that usually wears their woman card on their sleeve, but I was kind of inspired by the whole all-female mission leading up to it. So the criticism hit me hard. Like I said, I knew it was coming. I was just surprised by how much criticism there was. Cady, what do you think?
I was definitely surprised. And I've always felt very, very lucky to have had the career that I've had and to be able to go to space. And the worst part about it is that you don't get to bring everybody with you, that if they could only go there, what they would see, how it might change them, not just that view of the Earth, but different creative engineering solutions that they might imagine. It's just such a special experience, and it's always just too few. And candidly, with when you're with NASA, I mean, NASA is a government agency, and they've got a lot of rules about how to make sure that they're being exactly fair and all these constraints. And it really curtails their ability to celebrate the work and the people up there enough. And so I was really excited to see a launch where by bringing some people that were more famous, you get more eyeballs on this flight, and people get to see not just, one or two women on a flight, which is a little more typical, but 6 very different women. And I thought that by doing this and doing it in a way that was very public and celebrated so many different kinds of people, it was so smart, and it was something that hadn't been my ability to experience, with NASA. So I think that the time that we have in space, every moment up there is a way to then radiate outwards in terms of that person, what they see.
I think one of the biggest criticisms that people have with NS-31 and this mission is the fact that these women are now calling themselves astronauts. And, full disclosure, I called them astronauts on the live broadcast. And, the reason for that is, historically speaking, anybody became an astronaut the minute that they crossed the Kármán line, 100 kilometers above Earth. Now, in this new era of commercial spaceflight and space tourism, that very definition of astronaut, as you both know, has been the subject of great debate for years, right? Like, it was not specifically spurred by this mission. But Cady, I think one of the reasons that people are so up in arms about this is because they think that it diminishes what professional astronauts like yourself do. And so, do you feel offended when the crew of NS-31 calls themselves astronauts?
I do not. I mean, I don't think anybody can diminish the experience that I had. I had it. It's my very own, right? But I'm more about the experience than the definition. And for a long time, the definition that I've lived with is 50 miles above the Earth. If you have been 50 miles above the Earth, then you have been to space and you are an astronaut. I mean, we look at the early astronauts, those early flights, suborbital, 15 minutes, right? And so are we going to call the first NASA astronauts not astronauts? To me, whether it's 50 miles, 62 miles, it's about the experience. And, being in this community, I'm a member of the Association of Space Explorers, and everyone who has been, we have a ledger where everyone is registered. And you are either someone who has been in orbit around the Earth, or you are a person who has been suborbital, and you have a place in that ledger. And I don't know how they do it for Blue Origin, but for the space shuttle, I mean, they actually would look at whose toes crossed the line first, right?
Really?
No kidding. But, it's, these definitions, and I know the FAA has a different one. They've been there. They've had that experience. And I do think that eventually we'll figure out terminologies, but we all know who we are. And we all know the experience we've had, and they're all special.
Well, and how cool is it that we're at a moment in time where we can kind of nitpick about the different types of astronauts, right? Are you a professional astronaut? Are you a commercial astronaut? Are you a private astronaut, a spaceflight participant, a space tourist? There's so many different names, and these weren't even possible to exist just a few years ago. Rachel, where do you come down on this debate?
What we landed on through Space for Humanity was calling them citizen astronauts. What I tend towards is commercial astronauts, because they purchased a ticket commercially, or they got it sponsored or whatever, but they're going on a commercial flight. So that's what I choose to do. And it'll be interesting when we come to an agreement as a sector, because I know there's a lot of people who have supported this mission, but they disagree about the terminology. Then of course there's a lot of people who just don't think we should use the word astronaut at all. And then there's a lot of people who, like you, Cady, who are like, yes, like we all know who we are. So I think it'll be interesting in the future as we do come to some more clarity as a sector. But for now, what I choose to call them is commercial astronauts.
My mom, who was in the first class of women astronauts back in 1978, Anna Fisher, she is in the camp of, she thinks there are professional astronauts, and then there should be a name for everybody else. But she wants to delineate that, which I give her a hard time about sometimes. And then there's the Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy. And I just want to read what he said about this mission, because he didn't say anything about the previous mission, NS-30. He said, the crew who flew to space this week on an automated flight by Blue Origin were brave and glam, but you cannot identify as an astronaut. They do not meet the FAA astronaut criteria.
But the FAA, an agency within the Department of Transportation, which Duffy leads, is no longer in the business of determining who is and isn't an astronaut. According to the agency's own website, quote, a direct quote, the FAA no longer designates anyone as an astronaut.
Rachel, I'm curious what you think about Secretary Duffy coming out and saying what he did when he didn't say anything about the previous crewed New Shepard flight. He only spoke out after this all-female flight.
Yeah, it makes sense to me that he would speak out now, given the amount of public backlash. I think it's interesting because I do know that there were a couple of the women did do scientific experiments. I believe Amanda Nguyen did 3 different scientific experiments, and then
Fascinating ones.
yeah, and then the other thing that I think is interesting is I believe that Blue Origin is taking data from each of them. Like, there is data that is being used for the future of human spaceflight from them being on board this rocket and in this capsule. So, I'm not going to push back what he said, but those are just my thoughts.
One of the other big criticisms about this mission was the fact that there were big celebrities on board. Perhaps maybe the biggest celebrity to ever go to space. I mean, maybe William Shatner would top Katy Perry. Certainly in the space industry he would. But are celebrities in space good or bad? Do they raise awareness and attention about space and spaceflight and what this all means and why is it important, or do they detract from it?
So I have a perspective that might be different than much of the space sector, but for me, whoever chose Katy Perry to go on this mission deserves a massive raise. I think that it is absolutely brilliant to have an international pop star who probably has touched billions of people through her music on this. She came back, and yes, it looked kind of woo-woo and silly to people watching that she was talking about love and surrender and some words that probably don't make sense to a lot of people. And she committed to creating music from her experience of seeing the Earth. And when that music touches billions of people, I think like that is very, very positive. That is worth so much more than the price of a ticket.
And so many people, I did some commentary for the launch, and people in general all said things like, well, do you think it'll make a difference that so many young girls will watch Katy Perry and then maybe think that they could go to space? I said, well, that's a good start. Okay, but what about the boys? What about the young women and the young men and the older people too? So I'm all about the numbers. I really rejoiced in having people who were well known on this flight, but I was disappointed that in the focus on the celebrities, which I am going to point that directly at the media. Okay, we listen to these women, launch, land, speak their mind when they're just moments back from space, which is hard to do. And then in a really interesting press conference, I mean, I took a lot of notes. There was some criticism from one of the reporters, and in a very conversational, we're at the dinner table way, they talked about it together. And so I really loved the fact that there were 6 people up there that really got their messages across. And then basically I didn't see any of those other people except for Katy Perry and Gayle King. So I hope everybody takes a little time to go and look for these missing crew members.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the crew members in NS-31 that perhaps was overlooked a little bit because of the big celebrity names was the person that your organization helped partially sponsor.
So yeah, Amanda is absolutely incredible. Her story is that she was in school studying bioastronautics with dreams of becoming an astronaut when sadly she was raped. And the way that the system handled it, like she was supposed to pay $5,000 just to have a rape kit. The rape kit expired before they even looked at it. And it was just like one thing after another of the system not having the back of survivors. And she decided to dedicate her life at that moment, not to space anymore. She decided to step away from space and move into supporting other survivors of sexual assault. And she's done amazing things. I believe the number is like around 80 bills she's passed with Congress to support survivors.
She was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, right?
She was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. And after 10 years of doing that, I think she was like, okay, it's time for me to return to my dream of space. But now it's different. Now I'm not doing it as someone with a bioastronautics background. Yes, that's there. Yes, she did do science up there, but actually now she's doing it both as that and as someone who advocates for survivors of sexual assault. I think the other thing that people aren't thinking about is the impact of Amanda's flight is like that hasn't happened in human history. It hasn't happened that someone's had this kind of experience and fought for survivor rights in this ways, dedicated their lives to it, and then gone to space. Usually astronauts are really, like NASA astronauts, and Cady, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're very, very careful about who you present as publicly. And usually it's pretty just in line with being an astronaut and your background and all of that. And so Amanda being able to so fearlessly share is just incredible. And so, yeah, we're honored to have gotten to support Amanda in going to space. And at least one other crew member I know had to fundraise for their seats. So yeah, to those who are like, this is only, 6 ultra wealthy, I literally saw a feminist outlet say bozos go to space. That's not the case. That's not the case. And none of these women are bozos. These are freaking brilliant women.
Something I'd like to bring out from what you said, Rachel, is that literally every person on this flight, if you look at, like for example, Amanda, from the beginning, in her experience, recovering from this attack and thinking about, how to solve her personal situation, but it was also about, if this is happening to me, it must be happening to other people. In other words, what can I do with this experience that will then affect and help others? And I see that in literally every one of these 6 women. Aisha Bowe is someone who started at community college after in high school being advised that cosmetology, there's nothing wrong with that. And actually, I really love when people from that career help me. But really, but to basically be told you have no options except one we see for you. When she went to community college and a teacher there, professor, just said, I see you and I see you in engineering. And it made all the difference. So she went from literally community college to space. And then as it ended up, the 2 of her companies are basically dedicated to making sure that STEM materials and ways for other people to then make their mark on the planet are available to them. So it's always about taking an opportunity and spreading it further and giving more people opportunities or possibilities. And when you look closer at all the women on this flight, I think that's what you'll find.
Rachel, since you know Amanda, have you talked to her since the mission? How is she doing?
I think she's similar to all of us here, Kristin, in that I think she's surprised by the magnitude of the backlash. And when I checked in with her and asked her how she was doing, she was really focused on her gratitude.
I was excited about the science that she brought. It's a short flight, right? And at the same time, a few minutes of microgravity is a long time to really, do some observations. I guarantee you that every time you bring something up into the microgravity environment, you find out what doesn't work, what does work, and you're one step further ahead. And I appreciate that she brought those things from the MIT Media Lab.
How about the organizer of this whole mission, Lauren Sanchez? It was her idea to have an all-female mission. Of course, it wasn't like the first all-female flight to space. Valentina Tereshkova got that title in 1963, but it was the first time in more than 60 years that there's been a mission to space without a man on board. And I think people are kind of sick of the superlatives for everything that we were talking about at the beginning of this podcast, but it's notable that Lauren Sanchez felt really strongly about doing this. She's a helicopter pilot. She's had a lifelong interest in space. But of course, she's, facing tremendous criticism and backlash after what happened.
I didn't really know who Lauren Sanchez was. All I knew that she was either dating, I don't know if they were engaged at the time, but she was like with Jeff Bezos. And I definitely had my okay. Like Lauren Sanchez leading this flight. Like, I don't know much about this woman. What do I think about this? I don't know. And honestly, after being there, I just found myself continuously impressed by her. And when she came back, she was the first one to be interviewed after they came out of the crew capsule. And I watched her and I felt so touched and so grateful and happy that she chose to spend her money on this, because she was in tears saying that she couldn't believe how fragile and how peaceful the earth looked. And so now not only has she had this experience, but she also has access through her own money and through her future husbands to like so much capital, so much money. And I wouldn't be surprised if this influences how she spends her money, you know, how she builds, how she creates for the rest of her life.
I loved what you said in your Instagram post, Rachel. You said, I'm just reading a little quote from it. You said, this woman is about to marry one of the wealthiest men on the planet, and now she's fallen in love with the earth. If even a fraction of her future philanthropy is guided by this experience, given her net worth, that's worth much, much more than a spaceflight and a win. Cady, how do you feel about Lauren after this mission?
Well, I didn't get to know her very much, but I really appreciate the fact that she put this mission together. And for a long time in the news, there was just such discussion of the billionaires, you know, arguing and competing. And let's look at the way each of these people who has a vision and different resources is trying to pave the way to space for more people, many people.
I think one of the things that people are so upset about is that here we are, and on the broadcast too, we were talking about this mission being a part of making spaceflight more accessible to everyone, but it doesn't feel more accessible to most people. It still feels like it's something that only the wealthy or the super connected can do. And the thing that I've really been thinking about over the last week is think about how new frontiers have been discovered and explored throughout human history, right? It starts with the professional explorers. Then come the specialists, then come the wealthy, and then come everyone else. That is a pattern that is repeating itself now in space. And so, yes, right now it is only available to either governments, the best of the best, the cream of the crop, NASA astronauts like Cady Coleman, or the super connected. But if we're serious about democratizing space, which I really believe in, and I think both of you do too, then this is just a necessary part of that evolution. And I just think it's so important to look back at history and how this fits a pattern and how it may not feel fair now, that this is a necessary step to getting to where we ultimately want to be.
And history is a really good word there, Kristin. I would challenge everyone to look at events that interest them and then dig deeper than what you can see in just a few minutes on a screen. I mean, for example, the Wright brothers. Would any of us be having this conversation today if it wasn't for the Wright brothers? But actually, their sister Catherine was their ops officer. She was a big part, and so was their mom, a big part of making all those things happen. And I think when you take the time to look deeper, then you find all the different players, all the different people that make something happen.
How do y'all feel about suborbital space tourism? Does it matter? I mean, one of the biggest complaints coming out of this mission has been, this is just a waste of time and money.
Yeah, for me, it always goes back to the overview effect. It goes back to how it can really spark change on our planet. You know, how it can shift people's minds. It's valuable much beyond that, though. And so just for anyone listening who isn't aware, Blue Origin's mission is millions of people living and working in space. You know, they want to bring all of our infrastructure off planet so that Earth can be like the garden planet that it already is. And so like that's what they're working towards. Virgin Galactic, they're working towards point to point travel, to revolutionize travel so that you can take off from a spaceport in New Mexico and land in Australia less than an hour later.
Every trip off this planet makes a dent in the universe, I think. And exploration in general is hard, whether it's into space or into science, into engineering, but especially space exploration is hard for most people to understand. It's hard, it's expensive. And so the more people, I think, the better. Within the Association of Space Explorers, we welcome everyone who's left the planet. Everyone is a member. And that's been actually amazing for our group. I think as people who have left the planet, we have a point of view that it's hard to have if you haven't done that. And it's a point of view about the importance of understanding asteroids better because they're out there. And when one of them hits the Earth, it's not going to respect country lines. I mean, we need to be preparing for things that affect the whole Earth, the problems with space debris and traffic up in space. So these are things that astronauts have, I think, a different point of view about. And because we have more people in our organization and they have different resources than the traditional astronauts have had, we've been able to bring those points of view more easily to the public, to our legislators, to help find global solutions to some of the challenges we have here on Earth.
You know, the other argument for suborbital space flights, even though it's suborbital, it's still funding the development of these suborbital rockets like New Shepard and the bigger rockets like Blue Origin's New Glenn. And so I think you have a choice, right? You can either have more taxpayer dollars going to fund things like this, or you can have wealthy people spending their own money to fund it. The other big criticism about this suborbital mission has been just how short it is, right? How automated it is. People, you know, we heard Gayle King over and over say, I'm so tired of people calling this a ride or a joyride. Rachel, do you think it's a ride?
I don't. Like, they can call it that if they want to. You know, they're literally going to space. They're risking their lives. They're doing something that not very, like, only a few hundred people on this planet have ever done.
And it's still a lot more risky than going on a ride in an amusement park. Like, you're still sitting on top of a controlled explosive, right? Like, it still carries some serious risk. And in terms of the time debate, I find this kind of maddening because, like, 4 minutes of weightlessness, think about how many other cool things people do in 4 minutes or less. Like, people train for Olympic events that are done in 30 seconds, or a skydive is like 30 seconds or a minute. Like, yeah. And for many people, these are life-changing events. So that debate that, they were only up there for 4 minutes of weightlessness, like, you still got to see planet Earth from space.
Yeah. So a closing thought, Kristin, is Eugene Cernan, who was the last American to walk on the moon. When he came back, one of the things that he said was, we should have sent a poet. And so many people have been challenging, you know, like, why would we send a pop star to space? Why would we send these people to space? It's not useful. But there's been, like, literally Apollo astronauts who came back from some of the bravest astronaut missions I can possibly fathom and said we should have sent a poet, because we needed someone who was able to translate this experience and have people be able to feel the depths of what he just experienced. And so this mission, in a way, it was that.
Yeah, the people who go on the missions, the people who build the spaceships. I mean, we can't all do everything, and it's so important to share the story. And on this mission, you have Carrie-Anne Flynn, who's a producer, director of some really important films that really help us understand, you know, what the world was like and what the world can be like. And so to have Carrie-Anne Flynn have that view from up there, along with journalists like Gayle King and Lauren Sanchez. Full disclosure, I am married to an artist, and he insists that he'd get to be next. Okay. But, you know, when I was up there in space, you know, looking out and just wishing that, you know, that he could see actually what I was seeing.
We've talked a lot about criticism from outside the space industry, but I just wanted to touch briefly on some of the criticism that's come from inside the space industry. And I think it's mostly been positive, but I have heard some stuff. And I thought that Moriba Jah, who is an aerospace professor at the University of Texas, had a really great post on Medium. And I just want to read part of it. He said, "We're not mad that civilians are going to space. We're mad that we didn't get invited. We're mad that years of devotion to this field didn't land us a seat. We're mad that after decades of sacrifice, someone with no degrees, no mission patches, no aerospace resume, got to do the thing that we secretly dream of. It's human, it's envy, and it's okay to feel it. But don't pretend it's about protecting the legacy of exploration. That's just hubris in a lab coat. If we want to make space relevant, truly relevant to everyday people, we need to stop acting like everyday people are a threat to it. You can build rockets and wear lashes. You can be brilliant and be glamorous. You can be a real astronaut without a PhD. And if you disagree, then maybe what you're defending isn't science, it's status." As two women in the space industry, does that resonate with you?
I mean, yeah, I think it's totally right. And there's some really interesting dichotomy of, you know, if you make it in pop culture world, you're super glamorous. Whereas if you make it in the scientific community, you're super academic. And for some reason, like, putting those two together causes like a something just
brains
happens
to
and people-
explode.
Yeah, exactly. And people are like, no, it's not possible. They can't be smart if they're pretty. And so I just think that it's an opportunity for us to open our minds a bit to all that we can be as humans, as multidimensional humans.
Cady?
I agree, Rachel, in that it's about that word possible. I think that it's hard for people to, inside or outside the space industry, to think that it's possible really to go to space. I mean, outside the space industry is one thing, but inside they understand some of the ways that that can be done. And yet it's a long road, and it takes some serendipity. It takes skills, and at the same time being in the right place at the right time. And so it can be hard when somebody else gets to go, and it kind of makes you reset and go, okay, so this is still hard, right? Do I still want to do this? And I think basically Moramaja is asking us to look harder at why we feel the way we feel.
Yeah.
And it's hard times right now to think that the impossible could be possible. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see a lot of criticism of this mission. But I'm an optimist, and I just assume that people show up with good intent. And that really, I think, is a good way to start.
Well, thank you both so much for just speaking out about this, because I know so many people have been reluctant to do so. And I'm so grateful for your time, your thoughtfulness, your nuance. I know going into this, we really didn't want to just blindly defend this mission, even though we all supported it in our own ways, but we really just wanted to present maybe some other thoughts and other things for people to think about if this is their first foray into the space world. So I really hope we've done that. So thank you both so much.
Well,
Thanks
thanks
so much,
Kristin. These are
Kristin.
harder conversations, and I appreciate you encouraging us to have one.